Well, thanks for joining us for today's session on annual giving, leveraging data to reacquire lapsed donors and acquire new donors. This is a topic that's had a lot of press recently, and I think there's quite a bit of confusion. And I'm looking forward to really helping today to have a good discussion and get some firsthand experience and examples. So I'm Doug. I'm the President and CEO of Advisor Solutions. I'm joined by Sandy Yandel, who leads the annual fund at Northern Illinois University, also known as the NIU Huskies. Hi, Sandy.
Hi, Doug. Hi, everybody.
So I'm going to do a very short intro, and then we're going to talk back and forth, and Sandy's going to share the kind of work she's been doing and how she's used data to really improve reacquisition rates, success rates, gift size, all kinds of things like that. So I think it should be pretty good going from some concept down into how-to. The challenge we see out there is most of a lot of the examples we see, fundraisers blanket, and we use that word as just sort of a general shotgun approach to their prospects with a myriad of messages delivered through a variety of media. Some of these messages connect well with certain prospect segments, some fall flat. And often we see, especially as we come into the end of the fiscal year, a lot of messaging about it's the end of the fiscal year, it's time to give. And that will work well with some groups in your audience, and it will work far less well with others. For example, on non-donors who haven't given are less likely to respond to that than somebody who has been giving and is really involved. So it's really important to look at the messages and target them. And this is a typical example where these are each an appeal, and there were 34 appeals run or programs run in a fiscal year. Only 8 of them yielded over 2%. So that's way under a quarter got a 2% yield, and a whole group of them were really, really low yields. And some of the ones that had more sends were over in here. So that's the kind of thing you want, is to get these appeals up into higher yield levels and just more success. But it's hard. There's just a lot of activities and a lot of appeals and a lot of different segments and a lot of different dimensions. So it's hard to untangle this. And it really takes taking a massive data, often from different systems. Sometimes it's in a data warehouse, sometimes it's source systems, sometimes it's in other files and folders. It needs to be scoured, it needs to be aggregated in different ways, and then put together to find the patterns and what's working, what's not. And Sandy, I know you've worked with this, where there's a message, you try it through different media, there's different timings, it has different results with prospects, and sort of it cycles around and sort of, I think one message here, it's a learning experience. It's not something, here it is. It's you've got to do some experimenting and trial. I think that's what you've found.
Yes, we've had the opportunity to try a lot of different things. One of the reasons that Doug asked me to speak is we have used Advisor to make a lot of these decisions. We take, before we do any mail piece, or we decide to segment the telefund in a different way, or we're thinking about a new project where we would send either a series of emails or add in another mail piece, we want to make appropriate decisions. We don't want to send something to everyone, and so we take data from a lot of different places, and we can manipulate it and use Advisor to see what seems to have worked best in the past, and then use that to inform our decisions moving forward. A short bit of background. So in FY12, we kind of hit the bottom. We did not have a very successful year, and so we needed to really rebound. Our annual fund directly impacts how our colleges are able to operate on a year-to-year basis, as well as our departments, and so those expendable dollars are important. And so we went from a 46% live hunt renewal rate in FY12 to a 55% live hunt renewal rate in FY13, and we are on track to do even better this year. And we can directly trace it back to our ability to use Advisor to make data-driven decisions.
And I know the interplay here, as you went through that, you did some experimenting, and I know you did some work with non-donors as well, where you looked at what was working, what was not, which groups of them had characteristics that made them more likely to become a donor than some. So we were able to actually segment the prospect group and then look at different messages and connect things together. How did that go?
It actually went really well. We have a very large non-donor pool at NIU, and so it is physically impossible for us even to call every single person once. And so we made the decision at the beginning of last year to focus on people who are most likely to pick up the phone and make a gift. So we did some predictive modeling. We looked at characteristics of what a donor looks like, a typical donor, and then applied that to the greater pool using predictive modeling, and then created some segments. And we actually had a fantastic year for non-donors, and the average gift went up $15 for the non-donor pool because we were able to narrow it down and look at, even if we can't call everyone, we should really look at these particular people. And so we did that again this year, and we are seeing the same type of results.
Awesome. And I mean, you might just take this a little bit further as you kind of went through the process here, because I know you picked it up and you kind of started with this philosophy of using the data to get better targeting, better messaging, and it's been quite a, as you said, some of the returns that you shared, and I know you've got more coming later, have been pretty impressive.
So I guess where I can start is the annual fund here, as I imagine, as is at a lot of other places. You've been doing things a certain way, and it's been relatively successful, and so you continue to do them the same way over and over again. And I was lucky enough that I kind of had new eyes when I came in, and so we decided let's kind of scratch everything and literally just look at the data and see what it is telling us. In the past, they had segmented solely by college. They just looked at, if you belong to the College of Education, then we're going to solicit you as a College of Ed graduate, and it had been at the same time every year, and so they just sent out the letter, and that's how they were solicited in the past. What we decided to do last year for the first time was, let's take a look at someone as a donor. When do they usually give? How do they usually give? At what level do they usually give? And so we were able to do a little bit more segmenting and focus on our most important donors, those who give every year, multiple times a year, and especially those who give at the higher levels, at least $250 or more. And then we also looked at our lapse donor pool, sidelines, and we, in the past, they had solicited all the sidelines from 1-year lapse to 5-year lapse in the same way. And our data going through the year, we kind of kept that the same, but we realized through looking at advisor that retention or reactivation rates for sidelines that have only been lapsed 1 year were much, much different than those 3, 4, or 5 years lapsed. And so what we decided to do is a little test to see if the rates would go up even more if we treated them like our donors. And we continued to do that this year, and it's been very successful. Our retention or reactivation rates for our 1-year lapse sidelines continue to be much higher, as you would imagine for someone who's only been lapsed 1 year. Sometimes they don't even know that they have not given in a fiscal year. But the messaging, treating them like we still consider them a donor, has been a big change, and we think it's been very successful. And plus, it allows us, to someone who's been lapsed 3, 4, 5 years, we can have a completely different message than someone who may or may not realize that they haven't given in our fiscal year, because people don't always think about it in the same way that we do. And so those are just 2 ways, and it actually ended up being big ways that we could really use the data to make some decisions and then tailor the messaging to those specific groups of people.
We just been doing some work with a client, very similar theme, and on the lapsed donors, we looked at the donors who have been lapsed, 1 and 2 years versus 3 or more years, and then took the 1 and 2 years who had been coming to events or programs which had a much higher attachment or engagement, and they were much easier to reacquire, and the messaging could be around the areas they've been attached or engaged in, like if they're coming to sporting events or they're coming to symposiums or whether concerts or whatever. And then the longer lapsed donors took a different approach. So I like what you said there about how not all lapsed donors are the same. Some of them haven't lapsed that long and are still really engaged. Others have gone on to other things or whatever, and the approaches need to vary.
Yes, exactly.
We also, I was thinking, with just in that same example, we had coming obviously into the end of the fiscal year, and you can use the data to find, for example, of the most consistent donors, maybe those who have given for 3 or more consecutive years. They're kind of the rocks and the anchors. You can then mine the data out and see those that have given in each of the last 5 or 3 or 5, pick a number of years in December, but not June, and then who haven't given this year. So they would then become high priority to call or get somebody on, because, and some of them could be larger donors, because they've given consistently. They always give in December, never in June, but they missed this December of 2013 for some reason. Have you tried anything like that?
Yes, we have done it for that same group of people. We look at who have given consistently over the last several years, but not through the point in the year when they usually give, so that we can reach out to them, and if they haven't given, solicit them, but also ask them why, if there's some reason why they haven't given this year, so that we can start a conversation, open some dialogue. Thankfully, it's usually not too many people, so we can do it on a more individual level. We also do that for our higher donors, anyone who's given $1,000 in the past, specifically last year, and hadn't up until January, December. We focused on those people as well, because people who give over $100 are much more likely to renew, and so we wanted to know why those people weren't renewing and what we could do to get them re-engaged with us.
Sandy, could you talk a little bit more about the how you use the modeling on the non-donors? Because that's the beautiful thing about data and modeling, is you can pick a target. The concept of modeling is you pick a target and you compare it to a base population of other prospects or entities that could possibly have that behavior but haven't. And the modeling then tells you what the differentiating factors are and puts it in an equation that can score other people. So it'll tell you who has those same characteristics as the ones that had the behavior, in this case were donors, versus those that didn't, and then they could be your priorities. So what was some of the factors, or how did you go about doing that?
We used Advisor to look at our non-donor pool. We took a look at anybody who had given in the past and looked at, for us at NIU, what do those people look like? What schools do they typically graduate from? Are they male or female? Have we already done a screening on them in the past, and how does that, what score they got on those particular screenings impact if they are likely to be a donor or not? One thing that we found, we got some pretty typical results. The College of Business or our education graduates tended to be higher on the charts. But we also found that a model that we had done probably 5 years in the past that was looking at whether or not someone was likely to be a major gift donor actually was more predictive of someone being an annual fund level donor at all, just any level donor, than it was for major gifts. And so it was kind of cool to see that we actually could still use this old data to help us make some decisions at the annual fund level. We did a separate model to look at $1,000 and above donors, and most of the characteristics were the same. The more information that we tended to have on someone in general, the more likely that they were to make a gift. But that makes sense, because if someone's providing information for us, or they're logging in and telling us their updated phone number or where they work, then they want to engage with us. But then we took all of the data and we took the model and we scored everybody in the database that had never made a gift, and then segmented it from there, what we were going to ask them for in the telefund. We typically do our acquisition through the telefund, not necessarily direct mail at this point because of how much it costs. And then we went from there, and we had the students calling all year at different times and different days to see if people will pick up the phone. And our goal for acquisition is between 7 and 9%, and we get at least that in all of these pools, if not higher. Some days we'll see like 12 to 15% on this group, and so we're really pleased looking back and comparing it to other groups of people, other non-donors. We can see that there definitely is a correlation between the two. And this year we've been able to look at first-time donor retention rates. So if someone gave for the first time last year and then gave again this year, we want to see if that percentage has gone up. Because if we are using this model and these people are likely to be donors, we don't want them to just give one gift and be done. It's really expensive to acquire a donor, and we want to keep them as a loyal supporter of NIU. And our first-time donor retention rate is much higher than it has been in the past. So that is not just a factor of using the model and how we've been soliciting them, but other program elements as well. But starting with a good group of people that are appear most likely to give, it makes a difference. So is that kind of what you were
done
thinking
these
about?
models yourself in-house, you and your team. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, we try to do as much as we can in-house, especially because we like to, if something comes up during the day or we want to add a mail piece or a telephone group, we don't want to have to go back and forth and have somebody else do it for us. That's kind of, it makes things take a lot longer. Plus, the annual fund is always moving. There's lots of different things going on. Maybe something happens at the school, or you find out some other bit of information. We like to be able to use that as we go along. And one example, we started looking at Advisor to see who we were going to send our direct mail pieces to. We, in the past, had every live bunch got the fall mailing. And this year and a little bit last year, we decided, well, maybe we should see who's responding to them. Have they ever given through direct mail before? Do they actually want to mail piece? And so we heavily reduced the amount of people that are actually getting our mail pieces, but we are raising a lot more money, and our return rates are actually much higher, even though we're sending to a smaller group of people. But we take the information that we have and we look at it before we decide to do something. But we weren't able to do that in the past because we didn't have access to the data on the fly, and we're able to do it ourselves. So that's a everyday impact of having this product in front of us.
And you're using Millennium as a source system.
Correct.
Yeah. So, and I would say to the larger group, conceptually the data source systems, Banner, Millennium, Razor's Edge, Blackbaud CRM, and Agilon, Genzabar, they're all very similar in concept and what they actually store. So the things that Sandy's talking about here are applicable across all of those other systems. I'm going to shift the page here, and there's a set of different key questions. I'm going to bring them all up. I think we've covered a lot of this. You might expand. I mean, there's a question. These are sort of key questions that you've addressed in our other clients as well. I know participation. What direction is it going in? And looking at it, we usually break it into 3 parts. Retaining the current donors, and you actually want to see, the retention rate be the same or go up, and pay attention to it. If it starts falling, something's happening. The reacquisition rate of lapsed donors, you want to see the same there. You don't want to see that falling off, because they go further and further into the past and eventually become, usually we could put a clip at 10 years, and then they're non-donors. Different people handle that differently. But the same thing, acquisition rate of non-donors, you actually want to see that come up, because that's your future. And Sandy, you had some really pretty impressive numbers where you got in some of the rounds is up, and you said 12 to 15%. That's a pretty good rate to bring on non-donors.
Yeah, we're pleased with the way the predictive model worked and how many people are responding over the phone. And just to go back to your questions, these are the exact questions that I ask, that I'm asking myself right now as we begin to wrap up the end of this fiscal year, see what worked and what didn't, and then plan for next year. If our side-button rate our side-button rate went down slightly from our fantastic year last year, and we want to know why. Is there something going on in that group? Are these people that are 1 year lapsed, or were they in the pool last year and we didn't get them then, and we're still not getting them now? And so Do we need to do something additional? What were the messages that did they receive? How many pieces did they receive? We can look at all the data characteristics and then say, hey, well, what do we do moving forward? What else how else can we communicate with them that will be meaningful for them? And what other data points do we have that we can better utilize? Is there some correlation that we haven't seen yet? And it actually, I have a student who goes through and helps me do all of the data collection on these things, because it really is something that we use every day, and our whole team relies on the ability to be able to take questions and then get meaningful answers from the data as we go along. I do at least 3 or 4 reports at the end of the year that I can completely get all kinds of really good information that help us inform our decision making moving forward.
What I liked about you just said is you have a very inquisitive mind. I mean, you look at the data as questions start coming, and one thing leads to another. And it was you took the reacquisition rate of lapsed donors fell a little bit, which starts driving into some of these other questions. Which appeals, which groups, which messaging were part of the drop versus where it didn't drop. And I guess you could also tie that into events and activities and other exposures, other forms of engagement or cultivation. You kind of tied a lot of this together, and that's sort of what we see is the people that do this best. The advisor is trying to make the data easy to work with and very self-service, but then the person doing the work needs to have this inquisitive mindset and see something and not just say, oh, it went down a little bit. It went down a little bit. Let me check into what happened and what might have caused that and what could we change. Let's try some things. And boy, this really brought this group up, but this didn't. Let's do more of this kind of message or this kind of delivery, and so forth and so on.
And sometimes it's not that there is anything wrong. You just have to look at the data and see what else might have happened. So for our faculty staff campaign, we've been across the board driving people online. But for us, that means we have to be okay with some of our traditional solicitation codes for direct mail or even the telefund drop slightly, as long as we're seeing at least that much of an increase in online giving. And we had been pretty good about recognizing this with our fall and our spring mailings and our holiday card. But then faculty staff, I was looking at the data, and it was about the same as last year, and we really had felt like we'd had an increase. And it turns out that it was because people were going online and we had driven them there. And if we took all things considered, then it actually was up. But it was the taking advisor and looking at all those data points, because we can see employment in addition to all the giving elements that we've been talking about. So sometimes it is just taking that step further and not freaking out when you first see a piece of information and there might be something else going on that you just haven't noticed yet.
Well, giving in one sense is one part of an overall engagement or attachment, because if the giving drop, but they've been coming to events and reunion or clicking through on the newsletter, obviously they're still engaged. Something fell off. It could have been just they forgot to write the check or a variety of other things. But if all those things fall off, it's probably a more serious signal and something to dig in a little deeper on. On this list of questions, our favorite one is this one on the bottom, which very few do much with. I'll ask you, though, are we mining online media to learn about our prospects? Because when you do, the, say, electronic newsletter, the click-throughs determine, level of interest, are they clicking through or not, and also by what they click on. It's the Huskies football success, or it's the new center for whatever. It's giving you their interest area. And similarly, a number of our clients will use reunion surveys to get more information on people's interest areas, who they're attached to in their class, all those kinds of things. Does NIU work with those at this point, or are you more typical of our client base and haven't really gotten there yet?
We are kind of in the middle, I would say. We are collecting all of that data, and we are slowly getting it into our database, so we haven't quite gotten to the point where it's part of our advisor project. But all year long, we have any time that we post something on any social media site or we send something out, we have been collecting it so that we can eventually get to using that data. So right in the middle.
Good. Well, awesome, because, yeah, that can be clues on both level of engagement and also interest.
Yeah, we're very curious to see if there is any correlation between people who are giving and interacting with us a lot online. At the beginning, we were able to individually look up anyone who had made a comment or did something more noticeable on Facebook, but we're getting to the point where we can't look up everybody all the time anymore. So, yeah.
We have a last slide. You've alluded to some of this, but you might just take us through kind of what worked, because a whole bunch of things worked pretty well.
Yes. So our holiday card is one of our most impressive stats. We really took a hard look at how many people were getting it. It's an expensive piece. It's a nice piece. And we didn't want to not send it to people just to cut down on some costs. We had the same budget in FY13 as we did in FY12. And so we needed to really think about ROI. But we sent our holiday card to 5,000 less people and raised 3 times the amount of money than we did in FY12. And those are some really big numbers. And this year, we saw an even better response. We sent it to an additional 500 less people than in FY13. Our response rate went up even more than it did, and we still raised a lot more money. And it just shows that we were sending it to the right people. Not everybody needs to get a nice holiday card that costs a little bit more per piece, and not everybody is going to respond to it. And so by taking out some people who have never, ever given before December, and people who've never given through direct mail, or who only give like $15. I mean, for us, we will solicit them again and through the telephone and direct mail. So we just didn't feel it was necessary to send them our holiday card. But it was through our ability to get into the data and really look at those people and how many there were. If there was a data point that we thought might be important, but really it was only a couple people and wasn't going to affect the bottom line, then we could move on and think about something else. And the same for our average gift. We saw a $12 increase in FY13 over FY12, and our non-donor rate was up $15. And this year we've seen it even more by being able to, each time we're going to do a project, look at what our segments look like and who's responding and who we think are going to find meaning behind a mail piece or respond to certain messaging. Our average gift has been through the roof, and we're really pleased at where it's gone. So it is really the ability to say, well, maybe this, and go through and look at those data points in Advisor and say, well, no, that doesn't affect very many people, or it doesn't seem to be the reason, or something else has the exact same rate. But we can make those decisions as we go along, and it has been successful for all of our direct mail pieces. It's not on here, but last year our spring appeal we mailed to 8,000 fewer people, and we raised $12,000 more, and the average gift was up. Our cost per dollar raised has been the lowest it's been in 5 years, and so we're really just honing in on, let's look at how we are going to best message people in a way that they will want to respond and use the data to really inform our decisions instead of doing things the way that we had always been doing them.
Awesome. And that brings us right to the half-hour point. We have time for questions. You can ask questions by using the sidebar, putting your hand up, and we will unmute you, and then you can ask it live, or you can type in the question or the chat box, and we will find you there. Sandy, there is a question about, what has been most challenging in trying to use the data in this way?
I would probably say convincing everybody that it's okay to use the data to make decisions. If you're part of a program that is used to sending your holiday card to 20,000 people, or literally sending every person who's donated in the last 6 years a mail piece and all the same mail piece, showing them that it's okay to not send some people some things, or change the messaging, or change the way we segment. I mean, going from live hunt, side hunt to LiveUnt, a 1-year lapse SideLent, that 3, 4, 5 SideLent rate, and then long lapse. I mean, it's taken a little bit of time to make sure everybody's on the same page with us doing that. And not everyone gets asked as much as they used to, but we're seeing results, and so it's going better now than at first. So there's less pushback about it.
Sandy, actually, when we do this work, that's probably the biggest challenge we see in general. There's resistance to change, and you have this momentum that's just been doing something, and yeah, it's hard because that's programs and that's people and that's their jobs and that's what they've been doing. So I would ditto that one from our experience.
And one thing to add, we did notice at first, like I said, there were certain things that were being sent out at the same time every year to the same group of people, and so we noticed that, for example, our College of Ed donors were down a little bit by a point where most other groups were up, and we realized it was because they were used to getting the same piece at the same time every year. And so if you compared the last couple of years to the year that we were to this year and last year, that we just hadn't solicited them at the same time, and so that made a big difference. And so even training your donors to kind of things are a little bit different than they used to be is also part of the equation. Don't be afraid. You gotta let things work a little bit before you make another change based on a change that you've already made.
So another question just came in. What is your philosophy on how many solicitation touches a prospect should have in a given year?
Well, we definitely solicit more than once, and we use all 3 of our channels, the telephone, direct mail, and email. Kind of the overall philosophy isn't necessarily based on how many times we're going to solicit them. We do have a fall piece, our holiday card, and our spring solicitation. You get removed if you've already made a gift from the spring piece. Anybody who's made a gift gets the holiday card because it's also a stewardship piece for us. But really, we focus on saying thank you more than we ask, because there are people that want to give those second gifts, third gifts. We've seen the number of people who are giving more often has gone up. Second asks in the spring bring in a lot of money for us, and so we don't count people out just because they've given one time. We just make sure that we are thanking them for those gifts at an appropriate level for their gift. Did I answer the question?
Yeah, I think you did. Good job. Another question is, do you look at seasonality of giving? And I think I know where this is coming from. In some of our projects, we'll put in we'll group people into always December donor, which is they've given in December each of the last 3 years, or June donor, they've given in June each of the last 3 years, or it could be combined December, June because they give in both, or it could be variable where their gifts sort of can end up in different places. And because it was one of the examples earlier of you come into the June period, consistent donors who didn't give in December, yet they've always given in December, those would be primed to call. It sounds like you did something like that too?
We do pay attention to when people give, but we also don't, unless the donor has told us that they don't want any communication except in the month of December, for example, we do still send them things. We found last year we did a test where we did a lot more timing. We made sure that we weren't soliciting certain people at certain times, and we actually went down a little bit at first. And so once we kind of put things back in motion where people were getting communicated with on an ongoing basis, that it went back up. And this year has been the same. We've actually had more communication than I think we've had in a while. But at the same time, we also are cognizant of when people gave their last gift. Since we do second ask in the spring and we have an end of the fiscal year push, if someone has given right at the end of the year, we don't ask them right away. We focus on people who gave the fall before and start with them, so that there is time between when people give their last gift, because we want to make sure that we've said thank you enough before we go back and ask them for more money. We don't want to get too many comments that say, the only time Northern ever contacts me is when they ask for money. We want to make sure that we're showing the impact in between. But we we do use time-based solicitations as well.
A little bit of a different question, but is how do you avoid colliding with the major giving team in your solicitations?
The philosophy at NIU is that major gift prospects do get asked for an annual gift. However, they fall in, we kind of treat them like our high-end pools, our high-end pool, and I go through myself and look at whether or not someone should receive an annual giving solicitation. There are certain data points that we remove off the top, but we make sure that we are not interfering with them at all. We don't. The goal is that everything works together. Hopefully they kind of start giving, and then we move them up the pipeline. But we also don't want them to forget to give that smaller gift to their department each year. But we ask the major gift officers if it's okay to solicit their really big donors, just to make sure that we're not stepping on any toes. And but we also find that for a while back, there's probably a good 3 to 5 years where major gift prospects were not being solicited. And when we started soliciting them again, they said, "Oh gosh, we've been waiting to hear from you." I was literally standing next to a student at a telefund who was listening to someone say that they had just been waiting to hear from someone on the phone. And so it's really just making sure the lines of communication are open and making sure that you work together.
We've got a few more questions that come in. What is your most successful month for a drop date?
For a drop date?
Right.
That actually is something we've been playing with for the last couple of years, and we really feel like we've got a handle on it. For us, we see about we don't really start seeing results on a piece until about a month after it has dropped, because people have finally gotten it in the mail, they thought about it, they decided to return it, and it's made it through the gift processing. We actually have moved our holiday card. It used to drop early December. We've moved it, and it hits houses right before Thanksgiving, which was probably had a significant impact on why our holiday card does so well before the end of December, because that's when people want to make their gift before the end of the year. So obviously I can't tell you what's going to work for your individual institutions, but think about when your constituents want to give. And we always make sure to give people time to return the pieces. So if we're dropping our holiday card right before Thanksgiving and we still want to send our fall piece, then we need to send our fall piece early enough that they can get that, appreciate it for what it's worth, return it if they want to make a gift then, so that nothing like bumps up to each other. We always look at our calendar and see when major events are going on, when people are going to be back at campus. We like for one of our fall pieces to hit around homecoming, so that like everything works together. It shouldn't be very disjointed. And we've had a lot of conversations with our alumni association so that we can better coordinate all the messaging that goes out. So there really is no like specific month or time, just making sure that you give your donors the appropriate amount of time to respond so that all your pieces work together.
Another somewhat related question, what kind of remit piece do you include with your holiday card? And then do you do any kind of segmenting with those remit pieces, such as by ask amounts, designations, and so forth?
For our holiday card, since it is sent to everybody who's made a gift, in the previous year, minus our segmenting and then figuring out who to send it to, it's not a hard ask. We don't have any it's a feel-good piece, but we do include an entire reply device, including an ask array. We include an ask array on everything that we send out. It is based on the individual. We ask for NIU as a whole. We're asking on behalf of their college and department that they graduated from, unless they have indicated something different. So that's on there as well. We always give them a chance to write in their own amount or designation. But our ask arrays they are never lower than their last gift. So we include one in our holiday card and every other piece that we send out. There are very few things that we will send out without a reply device. One example being last year we decided to thank anyone who had given more than they had given the previous year. We did not include a reply device. someone mailed us a check with the letter, and we decided, well, maybe we should just include a reply device and not make any kind of ask, but have the ask around there anyway. And we made $15,000 off of it. And so it was a kind of a no-brainer. It cost us next to nothing to do that, just to have that reply device. And so even if it is a stewardship piece, we do include all of the options to give.
Great. Well, we was a half-hour webinar with a 10 to 15-minute Q&A, and a bunch of questions came in. Do a last scroll here to see if there's any more coming. If they come in late, we will get back to you with answers. This also has been recorded and will be posted in our user group website within a week or so, or maybe less. But I want to now just thank you, Sandy, for obviously some excellent work here and great results, and then taking the time to talk to us today about it. And if anybody wants to follow up with you directly, is that okay?
Yep. I am happy.
You've got our contacts. Just come to me, and I'll connect you with Sandy, and you can go to them. Okay. Anything else you'd like to say, Sandy?
I don't think so. I just don't be afraid to dig into the information you already have. Screenings are fantastic, and outside vendors can often shed some light on things, but you probably don't know the wealth of the information that you already have. And even if it's not as robust as I am lucky to have access to here, I think you'll be surprised at some of the changes you can make based on whatever data you already have just by getting the chance to look at it.
Well, thank you. Great advice there, and appreciate your time, and thank you all for joining us. Take care. Have a great day.